I've always felt bad for people like Brandon. No matter how hard you try to warn them, they never listen. I'll gladly tell you his story, but don't say I didn't warn you. Last chance for you to walk away. Oh, someone's feeling brave. Well, let me warn you right now. There's bravery, and then there's stupidity. But it's your call, I suppose. In middle school, Brandon and I were close friends. Thick as thieves, as they say. The problem occurred when he started hanging with the wrong crowd. It didn't help that I was more of the quiet and keep to myself kind of girl. I only ever saw Brandon as my best friend, but as we got older, well, let's just say that he wanted out of the friend zone. Badly. To be honest, at first I thought he was just joking around with me. We always made fun of romantic comedies and anything to do with love. But I wouldn't give to have that again. But he wasn't after love either. And maybe things would have been great if that's all it was. But it was very obvious from his body language to how he spoke to me that he wanted more than that. Brandon, for the last time, I'm not interested in you like that. I just want...
Why? Just tell me why, Josephine.
I tried to hush him so that he wouldn't make a scene, but he wouldn't have any of it. I was worried about getting attention from the teachers and looking stupid in front of everyone. Some small part of me was trying to look out for my friend because I cared about him. But after a while, I simply had enough of his bullshit. When simply telling him to get away from me didn't work, he tried using his height to get the better of me. His idiot friends standing behind him didn't help at all. I'm just not interested, okay? Now get away from me, I said, as I finally slipped by him and his goons. I was grateful that the teachers happened to be walking through the hall as well. Otherwise, I dreaded to think what they would have done to me with their mob mentality. Unfortunately, if there was any hope in repairing our friendship, Brandon definitely destroyed it by spreading disgusting rumors of me being a necrophiliac because my father worked at the local cemetery and I had no interest in dating anyone at the time. Knowing that he was the one spreading those ugly rumors shattered me. I did nothing wrong, was all that kept replaying in my head. I began to question myself. How could I have handled it differently? What if it really was my fault? I was the victim here, and yet even I was trying to destroy myself, all because he couldn't take a damn hint. He wanted more of me because I was growing up? Really? I was beginning to feel rage boil in my veins. Everyone, with the exception of a few friends that I had left, turned against me over the ugly rumors that weren't true. Thinking of what they called me made me sick.
Oh, look, everyone. It's the necrophilia. Be careful that she doesn't fuck the corpse of your loved ones, too.
They'd say, mocking me. I was always so grateful that, at the very least, my friends stood up for me. I almost became afraid that my dad and I would have to move away because of the rumors. When I arrived home, I barely spoke with Dad. I wasn't mad at him, I just needed space. Thankfully, Dad understood that, and I made it to my room. I worked on my homework as quickly as I could to hopefully get my mind off everything. I must have been more tired than I expected because it was 1 a.m. before I realized that I fell asleep at my desk. Dad had left me a note, stating that I could just reheat dinner and that he didn't want to disturb me. It also mentioned that if I wanted to talk, no matter what about, he would be ready to listen. Tears flowed from my eyes once more. I hated Brandon and the other kids at my school so much. And what was worse was that a part of me hated myself for feeling like I was pushing my dad away and allowing that creep to ruin everything for me. I don't remember when I stopped crying, but I was somehow able to get everything done for school and put it all away. I wanted to get back at Brandon for what he'd done, but I focused more on school because it was what Dad wanted, and I knew Mom would want that for me too. But as I cleaned myself up for bed, I just kept wishing that I could make Brandon pay for what he had done. I tried to bury the hatred in the back of my mind. I did, but it felt like a wound that wouldn't close. I could feel my heart hardening. I figured I would talk to Dad in the morning to see what could be done, since I knew that working as hard as he did couldn't be easy. I wanted him to get plenty of rest. But as I stood at the mirror, I remembered what my mom used to say before she passed away.
No matter how cold the world is, there's no point in letting it destroy who you are.
My thoughts had drifted, and I was starting to think of how much I missed my mom when suddenly I felt this sharp, stinging pain in my right hand. It felt like when you accidentally cut your hand with a knife, but only across my palm. "Ah, what the hell?" I said, as I quickly looked down at it. But to my astonishment, I didn't see any cut at all. I tried to see what I could have stupidly cut my hand against, but I couldn't see anything on that front either. But despite not seeing the cut, I could still feel my flesh splitting apart. The pain began to get worse as I saw a red light appear where the cut would have been. I started to panic, but I tried to get a grip on myself. I didn't want to wake up Dad over something that was probably just a bad dream and me sleeping wrong on my hand. I tried to wake myself up, but I think that's when I truly started to freak out. A voice in the back of my mind spoke in a hushed whisper.
Suffer more. Just a bit more. Child of the grave. You will soon be more than you thought possible.
And as it spoke, I unleashed a blood-curdling scream. I never knew I could scream so loud as hot tears streamed down my face. All I could do was hold my arm tightly as I fell to my knees. I didn't stop screaming or crying, even after my father tried to help me in his sleepy, panicked state. I could feel the room spin as the pain started to make me feel numb. My voice felt hoarse and my vision grew dark. The last thing I could remember feeling was my blood spill from my hand and my dad trying to shake me awake. The last thing I could remember hearing was a demonic voice.
We do not fear you.
As I tried to gain consciousness again, I kept wondering what it all meant. A voice telling me to suffer just a bit more, and then a different demonic voice telling me it does not fear me? None of it made any sense. It felt like years were going by. Lights were being turned on and off, and my hand was healing somehow. And then I was in a blank and empty room. The walls were gray, the floor was black, and the ceiling was white. I tried so hard to process where I was, but I could barely focus on anything.
Ah, Josephine Grey.
A tall, slender man said as he walked out of the gray wall and up to me. I began to panic and tried to move away from him.
You don't need to be afraid of me, dear. I'm more of your guide between this world and the world of the living.
He didn't have a face, but somehow I could tell he was smiling. He spoke in a very calming voice.
Don't be scared, Miss Grey. Come, sit. We have much to discuss, and I'm afraid not a lot of time to do so,
he said, as a table and 2 steel chairs appeared. Who or what the hell are you, and where am I? I asked. I was partly surprised with how bold I sounded, considering there was a man with long claws for fingers ahead of me. One hand was white, and the other was black.
Such language on such a young lady. Your kind surprises me every time a new one rises. But you don't care about that, right? So, let me make this as simple as possible. You'll wake up in a hospital bed when the sunlight hits your face, and it'll feel like a bad dream, but it won't be. The day you will wish death upon yourself because the horrors that will happen to you, you will be reborn. Now, won't that be fun?
I wanted to yell some more. Clearly, I was not amused by any of this shit at all. As if it wasn't bad enough to have an entire school against me, now I have some freak in my dreams telling me that horrible things would happen to me.
Oh, time is almost up for us. For now, I'm afraid. Since I've been through this with your kind so many times, I'll answer a few things. My name is Vanus, and I am the balance that keeps your kind going. You are in neither hell nor heaven, and all I want from you, for now, is to go grab the shovel. When you find the right one, I'll appear once more.
I wanted more information, but before I could demand anything, just as Venus had said I would, I woke up in a hospital bed. The first face I saw was my father's. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. His normally well-kept beard was a mess and his clothes looked disheveled. I hugged that man so tight that day that I thought I was going to crush him, but he didn't care. The only thing he cared about was that I was okay, and finally awake. I asked him how long I'd been asleep, to which he answered, a few days. He tried to comfort me by saying that he took care of things for me at school, and that even though I had a lot of work to make up, he would do everything in his power to help me get through it all. I really did have an incredible dad. Over the next few days, I just tried to forget everything and work on my studies. Dad helped as much as he could, but he said that he had to work a double shift in order to make sure all the bodies were ready for the funeral homes this coming weekend. I offered to help, but he insisted that school came first, and that he would be okay. When I could no longer keep my eyes open, I shamefully left my desk a mess and figured that I would simply clean it up in the morning. But as I fell asleep, that's when the nightmares started to take effect again. In the dream, I was killing so many people. There were people screaming and begging me for something that I could not make out. And I wish I could tell you that that was all the nightmare was, but it wasn't. In the last of the nightmare, 4 beings crawled out from the earth. That's when Vanus walked in, wearing dress shoes and a gray suit, and stood next to me.
I always hate this part,
he said, shaking his head. Vanus, what is all this? I asked, horrified at the decaying-looking creatures.
Find the shovel, gravedigger. You don't want to see what happens when you don't.
And with that, it vanished, and the nightmare ended. When I woke up, I tried to get a grip on myself, but no matter how much I tried to get myself to rationalize any of this, I just couldn't. The next morning, I woke up to a sound of a text message from Dad.
I'll be home tonight. We could celebrate your birthday then. Be safe at school. Love you always.
I smiled at the text until I realized that I've been gone from school for almost a week and that I really didn't want to go back. But despite my self-protest, I hurried and made it to school. I didn't know how people would react to my return, so I just kept my head down and tried to focus on surviving. I tried to forget about the nightmares. Part of me didn't want to believe in any of that gravedigger crap, but among one of the rising corpses was my dad. So, to put myself at ease, I figured that when I got home, I would just go for a quick walk through the shed to see about getting a shovel. I would realize how stupid I was and go home. It couldn't be any simpler if I tried, right? I thought to myself as I walked to the last class of the day. But something Vanus said still haunted me. He made it sound like I was going to suffer to find the shovel. And what made it even more unsettling was, of all things, why a shovel? How the hell was a shovel going to save anyone?
Hey, Josie. Long time no see,
said Brandon. This time, he was alone. Fuck off, Brandon. I want nothing to do with you, I said, in a new form of anger that I didn't know I possessed. Where did this new flame come from? I wondered to myself. I liked it. Admittedly, maybe a little too much.
Look, I just wanted to apologize, maybe even...
Apologize? Jesus Christ! You really think that after destroying our friendship for sexual favors that I would never do with you, you can just apologize? I think every star in the sky that if there even was a chance of making that mistake with you, you, Brandon Cloverdale, burnt it to the ground with your absolute bullshit. And then I walked away. I wanted to feel a sense of accomplishment, but instead, I felt fear. That fire felt like it came from hell itself, and not from me. I quickly headed home after school. The shovel can damn well wait, I thought to myself, in a fit of anger. My mom used to warn me that it was better to walk away than give in to my rage, but, oh man, was it difficult to not tear Brandon limb from limb right then and there. Stupidly, my mind wondered if this was the suffering that was needed. After all, despite the damage, it still hurt to lose the one and only friend who was truly there for me when my mom passed away. If only he didn't have such garbage friends! I shouted, to no one in particular, as I kicked a rock hard enough to send it flying into the cemetery gate. Suddenly feeling like I had just accidentally disrespected the dead, I went inside the graveyard, got on my knees, and prayed for forgiveness. If there was one thing I had the most respect for, it was for the dead. Most of them just wanted to sleep in peace, and with everything going on, I almost envied them. It was then that I heard the crunching of leaves and the distinct sound of evil laughing. They mocked me over and over, but I refused to move at all. Instead, tears flowed down my cheeks. Because I ignored them and showed weakness, because I had disrespected Brandon at school, because of the rumors, and because I refused to stand down, they decided to teach me a lesson. I tried to defend myself, but the more I fought back, the more they decided to cause me pain. It was just when one of those pieces of shit went for the knockout blow that, for a brief second, I saw the red glow from my hand again. And then, everything went black. Though I couldn't see through the pain, I could hear Vanus's voice.
Well done, Miss Grey.
And when I snapped out of it, I saw in my hand a shovel coated in blood. I then realized that, even though I'd been beaten, I somehow stood on my own 2 feet and was covered in blood. My brain tried to process everything around me, but the more I looked at the corpses and saw the shovel that I had thrown on the ground soak up the blood from my Brandon and his friends Lewis and Trevor, the more I just lost it. Their bodies were dismembered and scattered along the ground. I can still see the horror on their faces. I fell to my knees once more, this time screaming and crying because I couldn't believe I had done this. And by the time I'd attracted any attention, the bodies, the organs, the blood and gore had all vanished. It must have just looked like I was crying over someone's grave because all I received was sympathy instead of handcuffs. Questioning looks surrounded me as I walked out of the cemetery with my shovel that day. Why didn't I try to ditch it? Part of me is still unsure. However, some part of me knows that I can try all I can, but I am the gravedigger. The frail being that died and was reborn. The woman who had killed 3 teenagers and made their bodies disappear. But most importantly, the one with a new task ahead of her. Hell is falling apart and causing the dead to rise. It's signaling something to come forth, and the only one that can help me was the person who was supposed to prevent this from happening. You know him as well as I do. Allow me to tell you what happened when I left the cemetery that day. Vanus waited until I walked a few blocks from the cemetery and felt so broken that I didn't care where I was walking. I just couldn't stop. I felt myself shatter every single step I took in that autumn cold. I couldn't feel anything but a void where my heart used to be. Not a single second passed that I didn't think about how Brandon and I shouldn't have done what we did to each other. It was too late, and yet I could feel his soul screaming from the shovel. Vanus eventually let me sit down back in the room. I couldn't focus on anything, and I think he knew that, because he didn't say anything. He just sat across from me. Finally, I couldn't help but to ask, "What the fuck do you want with me? Why did you choose me?" Vanus simply looked at me with this blank canvas of a face and said,
Oh my, you really believe I chose you?
"Yes. You came to me and told me that I had to suffer a little bit more and become the gravedigger, whatever the fuck that means." I snapped back in anger. But despite my retaliation, Vanus kept his usual calm tone as he spoke.
Miss Grey, I never chose you any more than you chose this for yourself. The fact of the matter is, you are the gravedigger, because that shovel chose you to stop what is coming,
He said, with his large hands folded together to rest his faceless head. "What are you talking about?" I asked, more curious now than angry.
The short version to the story is that you need to learn to use that power to stop the dead from rising, because if you don't, the 4 horsemen will come. Truthfully, I really wouldn't care either way, but I liked my job. Despite the screams, it was definitely a relaxing job.
He said, with his long hands still holding up his face. I don't want this. I don't want any of this bullshit, I said, as I slammed my hands repeatedly onto the table.
And you think I do? You think I wanted to use a small part of my realm to talk to a mortal who has no confidence in herself? Who still wonders if she did the right thing over some scumbag human? You want facts, Miss Grey? Here it is. You mortals are so weak and sad that I gave up caring what happens to any of you. Hell, most deities have. The only reason I'm willing to work with you is because the Gravedigger's shovel, an artifact that was created to prevent the dead from rising and keep the damned in hell, for whatever reason, chose you. I don't have all the answers. The only thing I know is if you don't quit your sad, little pity party that you have over a piece of shit like Brandon and his worthless goons, we are all gonna pay for it dearly. The fact of the matter is, if you don't keep the balance going, we all die. So says the Treaty of Creation,
He said. Vanus was in a rare fit of anger that I had never seen him in before. The Treaty of Creation?
Typical. The mortal gets a full speech of how she needs to restore balance before the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse sees the signal and arrive, and only cares about the damn treaty. The Treaty of Creation is why miracles happen to a select few, why balance has to exist, why everything is the way it is. The Treaty of Creation was created when the Void blessed the Elder Gods with the gift of life and death.
So that was it. I lost my mom because it just wasn't in her favor to win? Losing everything bit by bit just happened so that the rest of existence could continue? Venus immediately looked at me, or at least I think he did, and said,
Look, Miss Grey, if I could let you go and pick someone else, I would before you could even process any of this as a memory. But the fact of the matter is that we are running out of time. You are the Gravedigger. And whether you like it or not, this does not mean I won't help you.
He seemed to be trying to show some sympathy. It took me a while to respond, but I thought of my dad. If the Treaty of Creation protected him but not Mom, then I had to take the mantle. I might have lost a friendship in one of the worst ways imaginable, and my mother too. But that didn't mean the whole world deserved to suffer the same fate as I did. I gripped the shovel tightly, and with a stern look, I looked at Venus and said, I'll do it. But in exchange, if there is any way that I won't have to be the Gravedigger, you will help me. And though Venus couldn't smile, I could tell that he was, on the inside. I shook his hand as he simply said,
Sounds like we have a deal.
Hello, our lovely children of darkness. Did you enjoy tonight's story? We sure did. A special thank you goes to the amazingly talented Spirit Voices for lending her a unique voice as Josephine Grey, the Gravedigger. If you want to see more of her work, visit her YouTube channel as well as her Twitter. Links will be in the description below. She is an amazing and wonderful human being, and I absolutely think you should give her a chance. That is my personal opinion, especially because she is an idol of mine. Anyway, It was an awesome collab, and I look forward to doing more with her. But we will see where the future takes us. Anyway, next to thank is all of you for being here, either for the premiere for this video, watching this later on, liking, commenting, and subscribing to our Dark and Twisted channel. A big thank you, however, goes to our Darkling Lucy Rosado and our Shadow Beast Justin Rosado. If you personally want to be filled with the Void's loving embrace as well, visit us on Patreon and become a member today. And with that, remember,
We're always watching.